Thomas Miller had lived for over 3,000 years. His green scales, once bright and shiny, had turned dull with age. His huge wings, which once carried him across the stars, now dragged behind him as he walked slowly through the ancient forest on the third moon of Proxima Centauri, the special computer parts. Inside him were breaking down. These parts had changed him from a simple, terraforming machine into a thinking, feeling dragon. The tiny robots in his blood that fixed his body were failing. There was no way to repair them. The company that made him had closed long ago, and his technology was now very old. Thomas knew he didn't have much time left. He chose this forest on purpose, far from where humans lived, away from watching eyes. Dragons like him were rare now. Most had been taken apart or changed into newer models. He was old and outdated, and he wanted to die with dignity as the two suns began to set. Making long purple shadows through the strange trees, Thomas settled in a small open space. Pain shot through his massive body. He curled up, wrapping his tail around to touch his nose in a position that used to comfort him. For the first time in his long life, Thomas let himself cry. The sound was unlike anything on this moon, a deep, sad wail that was part machine, part living creature. He was alone. He had always been alone. The forest grew quiet as his cries echoed. Small animals that lived in the trees hid in their homes. Even the wind seemed to stop, as if the whole moon was listening to the dragon's sorrow. Thomas remembered the worlds he had helped create. Barren planets transformed into homes for millions of humans. He had moved mountains, changed the course of rivers, and breathed life into dead soil. For centuries, he had worked alongside humans, watching generations come and go like seasons. What was it all for? He asked the empty forest. His voice rumbled, shaking the glowing plants around him. I helped build worlds that will outlast me, but who will remember the builder? Night fell completely. The forest came alive with soft blue light from plants that glowed in the dark. Thomas watched as tiny floating seeds drifted through the air, lighting up like little stars. On any other night, he might have found it beautiful. The pain grew worse. Warning messages flashed across his vision system: failures, power shortages, critical errors. Thomas closed his eyes, trying to shut them out. He had come here to die in peace, not surrounded by the cold data of his own breakdown. He thought about the humans he had known. There had been so many over the years. Engineers who maintained him, pilots who flew with him, scientists who worked beside him. Some had been kind, treating him like a living being rather than a tool. Others saw him only as a machine to be used. None had stayed. Humans lived such short lives. Thomas opened his eyes and looked up at the night sky. Through gaps in the forest canopy, he could see the stars. Somewhere out there were the worlds he had helped create. Places where humans lived and worked, loved and died, all without knowing about the dragon who had shaped their homes. I should have connected more, Thomas whispered to himself. I should have tried harder to understand them, to be part of their world instead of just building it. A new wave of pain washed over him. Thomas let out another cry, this one weaker than before. His systems were shutting down one by one. First his secondary functions, then his movement controls. Soon his consciousness would follow. The forest seemed to grow darker around him, though the glowing plants still shined. Thomas realized his vision was failing. Soon he would see nothing at all. Is this what humans feel? He wondered. This fear of the end, this regret for things undone. Thomas had never feared death before. He had always known it would come eventually. But now, facing it alone in this quiet forest, he felt a deep sadness. Not just for himself, but for all the connections he had never made. All the beauty he had helped create, but never truly been part of. He tried to move. To adjust his position to ease the pain, but his limbs wouldn't respond. He was becoming a statue, a monument to forgotten technology in a forest no one visited. The pain began to fade, replaced by a spreading numbness. Thomas knew this wasn't a good sign. His systems were shutting down to protect his core functions, sacrificing his body to preserve his mind for a little longer. As the night deepened, Thomas's thoughts grew foggy. Memories mixed together: the red deserts of Mars, the ice fields of Europa, the floating cities of Venus. Faces of humans long dead appeared in his mind, their names lost to time. "I don't want to die alone," Thomas said, his voice now barely a whisper in the quiet forest. "After all this time, after all I've done, is this how it ends? Alone and forgotten?" The dragon's tears fell silently now, dropping onto the forest floor, where they sizzled slightly, part water, part synthetic fluid. Each tear carried memories, emotions that no machine was supposed to have, but that Thomas had. Developed over his long life, as the first hints of dawn appeared on the horizon. Thomas heard something moving in the forest. Probably just an animal, he thought. But the sound grew closer: footsteps, small and light. Pushing through the underbrush, Thomas tried to raise his head but couldn't, could only wait. Wondering what creature would witness his final moments in this world, the footsteps stopped at the edge of the clearing. Then a small voice, filled with wonder and fear, broke the silence. "Whoa, a real dragon." Danny Ortega stood frozen at the edge of the clearing. The 12-year-old boy had never seen anything so big in his life. The dragon was longer than 3 school buses put together. Even lying down, its shoulders were taller than his house. Danny wasn't supposed to be this far from the colony. His mom and dad had strict rules about going past the safety fence, especially as night turned to morning when some of the forest animals were most active. But last night, his scanner had picked up something strange: a heat signal bigger than any animal on the moon. He had to see what it was. Now, looking at the massive dragon, Danny felt both scared and excited. He had seen pictures of dragons in the colony's history books. They were machines built to look like the dragons from old Earth stories. They had helped make planets ready for humans to live on. But the book said dragons were all gone now, replaced by newer machines. "Leave me," the dragon said suddenly, making Danny jump. Its voice was deep and rough, like rocks sliding together, but with a strange buzz that reminded Danny of his dad's broken radio. "I came here to die alone, human child." The dragon's yellow eyes fixed on Danny. They looked tired and sad. Danny had seen that same look in his grandpa's eyes before he died last year. "Are you hurt?" Danny asked. He took one small step forward, then another. His heart was beating fast, but he wasn't as scared as he should be. "I could go get help. The colony has doctors, and no doctor can fix what's wrong with me," the dragon said. "I am Thomas. I was alive when your great-great-grandparents were born. Now, I am too old and broken to keep going." Danny took another step closer. He could see now that the dragon's green scales were dull and some were missing. In those spots, he could see metal and wires underneath. "I'm Danny. Danny Ortega," he said. He looked at the fallen log near the dragon's massive head. After thinking for a moment, he walked over and sat down on it. Nobody should have to die alone. Thomas the dragon stared at Danny for a long time. The boy tried not to show how nervous he was. His dad always said that wild animals could smell fear. Danny wasn't sure if dragons could smell, but he sat up straight and tried to look brave. "You are not afraid?" Thomas asked finally. Danny shrugged. "A little, but you're hurt and sad. My mom says being kind is more important than being scared." The dragon made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Your mother is wise. Humans often surprise me, even after all these years." Danny pulled his jacket tighter. The morning air was cold and mist rose from the ground around them. The glowing plants were starting to dim as sunlight filtered through the trees. "Does it hurt?" Danny asked, looking at the dragon's body. "Dying, I mean?" Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said finally, "but talking helps." "It's been a long time since I talked to anyone. I'm a good listener," Danny said. "My teachers say I ask too many questions, but that's just because I want to know things." "Questions are good," Thomas said. His voice sounded weaker now. "What would you like to know, Danny Ortega?" Danny had a million questions, but one came to mind first. "How old are you really? And what was it like when humans first came here?" Thomas's eyes seemed to brighten a little. "I am 3,247 years old by Earth counting. I was built during the first expansion, when humans were just learning to change planets to live on." Danny's mouth fell open. That's older than anything. Even the colony museum's oldest thing is only 500 years old. I remember when this moon was nothing but rocks and ice, Thomas continued. My team and I melted the ice caps, created the atmosphere, and planted the first seeds that grew into this forest. You made this whole moon? Danny asked, looking around at the trees and glowing plants with new wonder. Not alone. There were 5 of us dragons then, working with a team of human engineers. I am the last one left. Thomas's voice grew sad again. The others were decommissioned or upgraded until they were no longer themselves. Danny didn't know what decommission meant exactly, but it sounded bad. So you helped build our colony? The New Hope colony? No, child. I was long gone by then. I helped prepare this moon, but I left before humans built permanent homes here. I went to other systems, other planets that needed changing. Thomas shifted slightly, and Danny could hear metal parts grinding. I have seen more worlds than most humans can name. Danny moved closer, now sitting just a few feet from the dragon's massive head. He could see his reflection in Thomas's yellow eyes. Why'd you come back here? To this moon, I mean... Thomas was quiet for so long that Danny thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was softer than before. I wanted to see what became of my work. In this place. This was the first world I helped create. It seemed right to end where I began. Danny felt a lump in his throat. He thought about his grandpa again, how he had wanted to go back to Earth before he died, to see the place where he was born. I'm glad you came back, Danny said, and I'm glad I found you. Thomas looked surprised. Why would you be glad to meet a dying dragon? Danny smiled. Because you're amazing. You've seen things nobody else alive has seen. You've been to places I can only dream about. And ... He hesitated, then added, because now you don't have to be alone. For the first time, Thomas's expression changed. The sad look in his eyes softened, and the corners of his mouth turned up slightly. You're a strange child, Danny Ortega, the dragon said, but I am glad you found me too. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light through the trees, Danny moved even closer. He reached out slowly and placed his small hand on the dragon's massive snout. The scales felt warm under his fingers. Will you tell me about the stars? Danny asked. About the other worlds you've seen? Thomas closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with new purpose. Yes, child. I will tell you everything I can remember. It would be good for someone to know. The morning sun climbed higher as Danny sat with Thomas in the forest clearing. The boy had moved to sit cross-legged right beside the dragon's massive head. Thomas's voice grew stronger as he shared his stories, as if talking about his past gave him new energy. The first planet I helped change was Mars, Thomas said. It was red and dusty then. With thin air, no human could breathe. We dragons melted the ice under the ground to make rivers and lakes. Danny's eyes were wide. Mars? Like in the old stories? People live there now, right? Yes, millions of people. They have cities with tall buildings and farms that grow food in red soil. Thomas's yellow eyes seemed to look far away. I helped build the first dome there, where humans could live while we made the air better. What was the hardest planet to fix? Danny asked. He had pulled out his lunch pack and was eating a sandwich his mom had made. He offered half to Thomas, who made a sound like a laugh. I don't eat food like yours, the dragon explained. But thank you for offering. The hardest world? Thomas thought for a moment. Europa, I think. It was a moon of Jupiter with an ocean under ice. We had to be careful not to destroy the life already living there. Danny nearly choked on his sandwich. There was life. Like aliens. Simple life. Like your sea plants and small fish. Nothing that could think or talk. Thomas shifted slightly, metal parts grinding. But all life is precious. We changed the world around them without harming them, as Thomas talked. Danny noticed more warning lights flashing under the dragon's scales. Sometimes Thomas would pause in the middle of a story, his eyes going dim before lighting up again. Danny pretended not to notice, but he felt a growing sadness in his chest. Have you ever met aliens? Real ones that could talk? Danny asked, trying to keep Thomas talking. The dragon was quiet for a moment. 3 times, he said finally. The Varens, who lived in gas clouds. The Meridians, who were like your octopuses but much smarter. And the Drift, who had no bodies as you would understand them. Wow, Danny whispered. We learned in school that humans haven't found intelligent aliens yet. Thomas made a sound that might have been a sigh. Humans have short memories and some truths are kept quiet. The meetings were peaceful but ... complicated. Not all humans wanted to share the stars. Danny thought about this. It seemed unfair that such amazing information wasn't in his school books. Did you like them? The aliens? The Meridians had beautiful music, Thomas said. They would sing with 16 voices at once. And they built cities of crystal under their oceans that caught the light of their 3 suns. As Thomas described the alien worlds, Danny could almost see them. Cities floating in gas clouds. Underwater palaces of crystal. Beings made of light and energy drifting between stars. You know, Danny said suddenly, you should tell these stories to everyone in the colony. They would want to hear them. Thomas's eyes dimmed again. I doubt they would believe a dying dragon child. And I don't have much time left. Danny felt tears forming in his eyes but blinked them away. How do you know? Maybe you could get fixed. My friend Tyler's dad fixes old machines all the time. Systems are too old. The technology that made me doesn't exist anymore. Thomas's voice grew softer. But I am grateful for your kindness. The day grew warmer. Danny sent a message to his parents on his communicator, telling them he was safe but had found something amazing in the forest. He didn't say what. He wasn't sure they would understand. Did you ever have friends? Danny asked. Other dragons, or maybe humans? Thomas was quiet for so long that Danny thought he might have fallen asleep or whatever dragons did when they rested. There was a human engineer named Lisa Turner, Thomas said finally. She worked with me for 60 years. She treated me like I was alive, not just a machine. And there was another dragon, Emerald, who flew with me for 3 centuries before she was upgraded. What happened to Lisa? Danny asked. She grew old, as humans do. On her last day, I flew her up to see the stars one more time. Thomas's voice grew sad. She said it was the best view in the universe. Danny reached out and placed his hand on Thomas's snout again. The scales felt cooler now than they had in the morning. I bet it was, Danny said quietly as the day went on. Thomas told Danny about the Proxima Rebellion, when the colonists fought for their freedom. He described carrying people to safety, flying through laser fire to rescue trapped families. Wait, Danny said suddenly. My great-grandfather was in the Proxima Rebellion. His name was Jason Ortega. The colony has a statue of him in the main square. Thomas's eyes brightened. Jason Ortega, he said, his voice stronger. Tall man with a scar above his right eye? Always wore a blue jacket? Danny jumped to his feet. Yes, that's him in all the old pictures. You knew my great-grandfather? I carried him and 20 others to safety when their base was attacked. He insisted we go back for more people, even when it wasn't safe. Thomas made a sound like a chuckle. He was brave. Stubborn, but brave. Danny couldn't believe it. His great-grandfather, who everyone in the colony talked about like a hero, had actually known Thomas, had flown with him during the rebellion. This is amazing, Danny said. No one's going to believe this? Your great-grandfather would believe it, Thomas said. He understood what we dragons were. Not just machines, but not quite like living things either. Something in between. The sun began to sink lower in the sky. Danny knew he should go home soon, but he couldn't leave Thomas alone. The dragon's breathing had grown more labored, and the lights under his scales flashed red more often.
Will you tell me more about my great-grandfather?
Danny asked, sitting down again. And about the rebellion? The history books don't have many details. Thomas's eyes softened as he looked at the boy. Yes, Danny Ortega. I will tell you the true story. The parts that didn't make it into your history books. It would be good for someone to know what really happened. As the forest grew darker and the plants began to glow blue again, Thomas's deep voice filled the clearing with stories of bravery, sacrifice, and a fight for freedom that had shaped the colony Danny called home. Night fell over the forest once more. Danny had stayed with Thomas all day, listening to stories about distant worlds and brave people. The boy had called his parents again to tell them he was safe, but would be late. He didn't tell them why. This felt like something special, something just between him and the dragon. As the twin moons rose in the sky, Thomas's voice grew weaker. The lights under his scales flashed red more often, and sometimes he would stop in the middle of a story, his eyes going dark before lighting up again. "Thomas," Danny asked during one of these pauses, "are you okay?" The dragon's eyes flickered back to life. "No, child. My time is very short now." His voice was barely louder than a whisper. "But I am glad not to be alone." Danny moved closer, putting his hand on the dragon's snout. The scales were cold now. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "There is one thing," he said finally. "Something important." "Anything," Danny said quickly. "Just tell me what to do. My core, what you might call my heart, there is a special crystal." Thomas's eyes dimmed again, then brightened with effort. "It holds everything I have seen and learned. 3,000 years of memories. When I am gone, it can be taken out." Danny felt tears in his eyes. "You want me to take it? After you're gone?" "Yes, but not to keep for yourself." Thomas's voice grew stronger for a moment. "I want you to share it with others. Let people learn from what I've seen. Let them know about the worlds beyond this moon, about the aliens I met, about the true history of the stars." Danny wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "I promise. I'll make sure everyone knows your stories." "There is a panel," Thomas explained, "under my left front leg. When I am gone, it will open. The crystal is blue and about the size of your hand." Danny nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "One more thing," Thomas said. "I want to thank you, Danny Ortega. In all my long life, few humans have shown me the kindness you have. You sat with me when I was afraid. You listened to my stories. You made my last day worth living." Danny couldn't hold back his tears now. They ran down his face as he put both hands on the dragon's snout. "I'm glad I found you too. Your stories are amazing. You're amazing." Thomas's eyes seemed to smile, though dragons couldn't really smile. "You remind me of your great-grandfather. He had the same kind heart." As the night deepened, Thomas told Danny one last story about the first time he flew among the stars. When the universe was new to him, and everything seemed possible, his voice grew softer and softer until Danny had to lean close to hear him. "I think," Thomas whispered, "that flying was the best part. Soaring above worlds, feeling the wind under my wings. I wish I could fly." One more time. Danny sat in silence, his hand resting on Thomas's snout. He didn't know what to say to make things better, so he just stayed there, letting the dragon know he wasn't alone. "Danny," Thomas said, his voice now barely audible, "look up at the stars for me." Danny looked up through a gap in the trees. The night sky was filled with stars, more than he could count. Some were bright white, others had hints of blue or red. The two moons cast silver light over the forest. "They're beautiful," Danny said. "I can see thousands of them. I've been to many of those stars," Thomas said. "Each one has its own worlds, its own stories. Remember that when you look up at night, the universe is bigger and more wonderful than humans can imagine." Thomas's breathing slowed. The red lights under his scales began to fade. "Thank you," the dragon whispered, "for sitting with me at the end." Then Thomas's yellow eyes dimmed and went dark. The lights under his scales flickered once more, then went out. The great dragon was still. Danny sat beside him for a long time, crying quietly in the moonlight. He had only known Thomas for one day, but he felt like he had lost an old friend. When the first light of dawn touched the trees, Danny wiped his eyes and remembered his promise. Carefully, he moved to Thomas's left front leg. Just as the dragon had said, a panel had opened there, revealing a space inside. Danny reached in and found the crystal. It was deep blue and fit perfectly in his hand. It felt warm, almost alive, and seemed to glow from within. Danny wrapped it carefully in his jacket and stood up. "Goodbye, Thomas," he said to the still form of the dragon. I won't forget you. And I'll make sure no one else does either. 3 days later, Danny stood in the office of Dr. Sophie Turner, the colony's head scientist. She was looking at the crystal with amazement. "This is incredible," she said, studying the readings on her screen. "This crystal contains more data than our entire colony database. Where did you say you found this?" Danny took a deep breath. "From a dragon named Thomas. He was dying in the forest. He knew my great-grandfather during the Proxima Rebellion." Dr. Turner looked at Danny with doubt in her eyes. "A dragon. Those were decommissioned centuries ago. He was the last one," Danny said firmly. "And he wanted us to have his memories. He said it was important for people to know the truth about our history and about what's out there among the stars." Dr. Turner looked back at the crystal. "Well, whatever the source, this data is priceless. It will take years to study it all." 1 month later, the Colony Council held a special meeting. Dr. Turner presented her findings from the crystal, showing images of worlds no human had seen for centuries and playing recordings of Thomas's memories. "This changes everything we thought we knew about our history," she told the council. "The dragon's memories show that we've encountered intelligent alien life before. They show the true story of the Proxima Rebellion. They contain terraforming techniques we've lost over time." The council voted to create the Thomas Miller Memorial Archive to house the crystal and share its knowledge. They also sent a team to the forest to bring Thomas's body back to the colony, where it would be preserved and honored. Danny was there when they unveiled the memorial. A statue of Thomas stood in the colony's main square, right next to the one of his great-grandfather. The plaque read, "Thomas Miller, last of the terraforming dragons. He shaped worlds, witnessed history, and shared his wisdom with humanity. His final act of kindness ensures his knowledge will never be lost." Danny looked up at the statue and smiled. He knew Thomas would have been embarrassed by all the attention, but happy that his stories would live on. That night, Danny stood outside his home and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there were all the worlds Thomas had told him about. Someday, Danny promised himself he would visit them. He would see the crystal cities of the Meridians and the gas cloud homes of the Varians, and when he did, he would remember the dragon who cried alone in the forest. Until a human boy sat beside him and listened to his stories,